All right, we're back for part 2 of our ecosystem study guide. We're on question number 9, and it is asking us which best describes animals that eat only plants. Now remember, which best describes animals that eat only plants. Now, we have to think about what some of these words mean. Decomposers. What do decomposers do? Well, we know that they break down dead materials. All right, carnivores. What do carnivores do? Carnivores, they eat meat. Sorry about that. I'm at home. I do not have a board to write on. Herbivores. Herbivores, we look at our definition of herbivores. They eat plants. Now, if we think about this, which best describes an animal that eats only plants? Does not work with decomposers. Does not work with carnivores. Your answer to that would be herbivores. How are consumers generally classified? Now, we talked about this in class. What does it mean to be classified? How are consumers usually grouped? Now, if we think about our consumer groups, when we have our consumer groups, we had herbivores, we had carnivores, and we had omnivores. And we said that herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat meat, omnivores eat everything. How do we know what they are? We know not by the amount of food they eat. We don't know by the size of their tracts. Can't tell that. And not by the way they digest their food. That makes no sense at all. We classify consumers by the food they eat, the type of food they eat. If they eat plants, herbivores. If they eat meat, carnivores. If they eat plants and they eat meat, they are omnivores. All right. Bacteria released into the Gulf of Mexico help clean up an oil spill. What role, what niche do bacteria serve in the marine ecosystem? Now, when we think back into class, we talked about bacteria in class, and we always use that as an example of decomposers. We had bacteria, fungi, and our earthworms as our decomposers. That's something to think about. Now, what role do they play? Are they decomposers? They are. I want to make sure there's not a better answer. Are they consumers? No, they are not. Are they producers? No, they do not make their own food. Are they predators? Are they hunting things? No, they are decomposing things, breaking things down into nutrients and soil. So if there's an oil spill, we can release some bacteria to help break that oil down back into the nutrients and clean the ocean up. A is your best answer for that. Number 12. Most likely. What is most likely an effect of construction on a forest ecosystem? So you have a forest, you start doing some construction at the forest. What's most likely? Okay. Does construction decrease the amount of sunlight for the ecosystem? Well, I guess if you're building gigantic buildings, it possibly could. This is not a great answer, but I guess it's a possibility. I'm going to put an M for maybe. Okay. Construction. So when we're thinking about construction, we're building buildings and cutting down trees and stuff, will increase the amount of food. I have never seen a construction site where they are bringing in animals, so that's a terrible answer. Don't like that one. Construction will increase the number of trees and plants. Think about what they do in construction. They typically tear down the land and put up buildings. Are we increasing trees? No, we are not. We're probably decreasing the amount of trees and plants. Construction will decrease natural cover, nesting places. So think about it. We cut down trees. We cut down bushes. What are we doing? We're taking away places that birds could nest. In the bushes, we're taking away cover for some other small animals, maybe your chipmunks and rabbits. So now I've got this answer up here that I guess is remotely possible. And this answer here, when you're chopping down a tree, are you cutting down a nesting place? Absolutely. D is your best answer. Remember, when you see these kind of words, you're probably going to have more than one good answer. Number 13. Noah visited a park that had many oak trees. What best describes the role, the niche of an oak tree in the ecosystem? Okay, is its role to live for a long time? Is its role to have leaves that change color? Is its role to have strong branches and trunks? Or is its role to be a source of food and shelter for animals? Well, I think this is something that they do. I don't necessarily think that this is their role. I don't think having leaves that change colors is its role. It might be something that happens, but it's not its role. Having strong branches and trunks, that is just a description of an oak tree. Source of food, source of shelter, absolutely you could put that down as its niche or its role in the ecosystem. D is your best answer for number 13. Let me get out the highlighter for this one. It's a lot of stuff here. Honeybees collect nectar from flowers. They use that to make honey. When a honeybee goes to the flower, some of the pollen gets on its legs. Pollen drops into the next flower. Which statement best describes the role of honeybees, the role or the niche of honeybees in the life cycle of plants? Do honeybees help spread plant seeds? Well, if I look back up in here, I don't see anything about seeds. I know that seems like a good answer, but I don't see anything about seeds up here. I see things about pollen, nothing about seeds. That is not a great answer. Honeybees help flowering plants reproduce. How do they reproduce? By spreading pollen to each other. I like this answer. I think this is a very good possibility of an answer. Put a maybe beside that. Honeybees help plants photosynthesize. You have to remember what is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is when plants use sunlight to make energy. Is there anything in that statement that talks about bees? No, that's photosynthesis and sunlight. That which means I'm not a big fan of this answer. Honeybees provide flowering plants with energy. Now, I think we answered that question here. How do flowering plants get energy? With photosynthesis. So I've used my answers to answer the question that I have. No, honeybees do not provide them. They help flowering plants. How? By pollen dropping into the next flower that the honeybee visits. Your best answer for 14 is B. 15. Again, when you see this, be careful. It's probably more than one good answer. Which best explains how an ecosystem supports a variety of organisms? Okay. Most organisms are completely independent, meaning organisms never interact. If you've been in class at all, we've had the exact same I can statement for 4 weeks, which is I can talk about how factors in an ecosystem interact. So being independent means you never interact. So that is a terrible answer. Organisms sometimes die out and are replaced. Well, some plants die, they are replaced. A few squirrels die, they maybe just die out of natural causes. They get caught by a hawk, they're replaced. That's not a bad answer. Let's put a maybe beside that one. Maybe there's a better answer. We'll see. All organisms are able to live in separate habitats. Let's just think about maybe a small pond in the forest. Are all the fish in separate places? No, they're in the same place. All the deer and squirrels, foxes, owls are all in the forest. They are not in separate habitats. So I don't think that that's a good answer. Now, organisms use parts of the ecosystem differently. Okay, so a bird might use the tree for a nest. Okay, another animal, maybe a deer, might use the tree as shade or to block it from the rain. I like that. Other animals might use the tree just to get a high vantage point to see predators. Some predators might use the tree to see prey. So they're using that very differently. Some animals use the bushes in a forest as shelter. Some animals, maybe a deer, uses the bush for food. They eat the berries and leaves off of that. So I really like this answer better than B. So I'm going to say that B is not the answer, and I'm going to go with D. Again, be very careful. You can easily reason yourself out of the correct answer when you see those highlighted words of best or, most likely. So just be careful with those. That's number 15. 16. Here we are again. Which best describes what would happen if decomposers were removed from an ecosystem? Okay, well, let's talk about decomposers. What do decomposers do? They break down dead materials into nutrients and good soil. Okay, so let's just think about that. Let's think about what would happen if we took out the one thing that breaks down dead materials and turning it into good soil. Okay, this says the ecosystem would have too many producers. Well, we noted that good soil in our experiments was a very important abiotic factor for our producers. So I think this is contrary to what would happen. If the decomposers aren't there, the soil would become bad, and I think you would have less producers. I do not like that answer. The ecosystem would only support the consumers. Okay, so the plants may not live, but the consumers could live. I think I could maybe argue against that, but that's an okay answer. I can see how someone might say that. The ecosystem would increase and produce more organisms. I'm trying to think how, if I take out the decomposers, that nothing dead is being broken down, nothing dead is being turned into soil. It's all just kind of laying there, blocking the soil from doing anything. There's no good soil being made. I just don't see how that would produce more organisms, because you would lose the grass, you would lose the bushes, you would lose the trees, and once you lose those, your primary consumers, that was my dog Sherlock, sorry. Your primary consumers would go down. So I think this is kind of a bad answer. Now, the ecosystem would fail to support the organisms it contains. So let's think about this. If we have grass and our population of grass goes down because we don't have decomposers. The decomposers are gone, so our grass goes down. Now, we said in class today that if grass goes down, our herbivores, what happens to them? Well, if they don't have any food, they go down. If my herbivores go down, then that starts to affect your carnivores. If the carnivores don't have anything to eat, then they go down. I'm starting to see that the loss of decomposers affects the entire ecosystem, and everything would start to fail. This is a better answer than B. So be careful when you get to those, because it could be very, very easy to answer one of those and answer it incorrectly by not talking yourself through it. It's common to see wild animals like deer and coyotes in cities and neighborhoods. I know I see them in my neighborhood. I'm fairly certain most of us see deer on the way to school sometimes, on the way to band practice, dance practice, baseball practice. We see them quite often. What's most likely, again, be careful with this word, most likely a reason the animals are found in these areas as opposed to in the woods where they should be. Deer and coyotes prefer to be near houses. That just doesn't even seem like a plausible answer. I think that they prefer to be in their natural habitat, which is the woods. They prefer to be near people. Now, if you've ever seen a deer, they hate being around people. They prefer to be as far away from you as possible. Their habitat is increasing. So are we gaining more woods? Or are we building more and more neighborhoods and tearing more things down and decreasing the size of habitat? What would be the reason why you see deer in cities and in neighborhoods and in our backyards? Probably not because we're building more forests, but we're tearing more forests down, and they have smaller and smaller areas to live in. Their habitat is decreasing in size. So D is your best answer on that one.